brought up by Kevin, and more. Beverly Hallberg with the Heritage Foundation and former Missouri Congressman Don Calloway. Great to have you both.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ann. Happy New Year.
Okay, I want to start with Linda Bloom, who is one of the attorneys here that we're talking about. And, excuse me, Lisa, this is what she has to say in the New York Times. She said, it doesn't cost anything to publicly air allegations. Security and relocation are expensive and were sorely needed in a case of this magnitude in a country filled with so much anger, hate, and violence. Beverly, she has said this is about protecting these women if they decided to come forward and not paying them to manufacture something.
I think in many ways it's damaging to them. If these claims are true, if they're proven true, of course they're extremely concerning. But when you have someone saying, I'll pay you, she even reached out to tabloids saying we can even do some type of interview with them if you want. She was going to get a payout herself to do this. I actually think there is then reason, as you were just reporting, to say, hey, you're getting paid for this. Are these actual allegations something that should be pushed against him? And I would say as well, when you take a look at the allegations against President Trump, I think it also begs the question, why are they having to work so hard to find women who want to speak out? There are some that have, but having to pay women, I actually think it hurts their case when they're saying he did something.
Well, and that's the thing, is that even if these are legitimate claims, if any of these women, when you have the money, as Kevin said, when money factors in and people have other questions, this is from a very prominent attorney, Douglas Wigdor, who's also in this New York Times piece. He says this: if you're getting money from someone who has an axe to grind against the person you're accusing of unlawful activity, that most certainly opens the door to a line of questioning that very well could undermine the veracity of your client's story, Don.
It's not good. I used to practice law as a younger fellow, and this is a bad fact, but it's not a determinative fact by any means. At the end of the day, you have to kind of get past the salacious nature of this whole thing and look to the nature of the claims. Is what they're saying true? Will they have their day in court? And ultimately, is it still something that's provable, yes or no? And in this Me Too moment that has affected all of our professional and public and private lives, the president is not the one person who gets to say, well, they were paid. That's not the case. The New York Times, the Washington Post, whatever political slant they may take, is pretty standard practice, as Kevin reported, to pay witnesses to come forward with various news pieces. Again, this is not a good fact, but it's not a determinative fact by any means. What we should be looking at is whether or not what these women are saying is true.
Well, and in so many of these cases, if you're in the middle of an election, as you said, it's so important to have due process and have your day in court. But Beverly, so many times when these are in the middle of the campaigns, there's not going to be that time. So it's now just the court of public opinion, and that can have a significant impact on who gets elected and who doesn't.
And you were even saying with this was about Lisa Bloom coming out and saying we wanted to do this prior to the election. So this was also trying to change a trajectory of election, which I do have concerns with. I would say when you're taking a look at accusations, you have to say, can you corroborate this information? Are there multiple people? Are they speaking on their own? This is where the payment gets a little bit tricky, because if they are getting paid off, you wonder why they're doing it. So you have to look at multiple people speaking out, figuring out whether or not anybody else can corroborate it, because I think that's what it comes down to in figuring out whether or not it's actual proof.
Yeah, and Don, folks have done this on both sides of the aisle. I mean, there are Democrat strategists, Republican strategists, people out there. In the New York Times piece talks about going back to Paula Jones and beyond that. I mean, there have been coordinations across the years and across party lines on this kind of thing.
There have, and so it's not really a partisan issue. But I would also think, as Kevin reported, there's very practical matters to why you would pay a witness or someone to come forward. First of all, the day that a woman comes forward, her life is no longer hers. She's a public figure, whether or not she asked for it. She's got media camped out, and her name is in front of the world. Perhaps that's something that you have to incentivize someone to do if their claims have any truth. Secondly, if this thing moves towards legal proceedings, as the Blooms and Allreds of the world want it to happen, lawsuits cost money. You have depositions, you have court reporters, all these things that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to pay for that ultimately have to be financed. So again, I realize that the money is not a good fact here for big-time Democrats here, but it's kind of unfortunately the reality that we live in, and it doesn't mean that these women do not have serious claims which should be really looked at.
Well, and Beverly, some of the women over the last few weeks that we've heard about these reports with Lisa Bloom ultimately decided not to come forward. They either wanted a lot more money because they thought their lives were never going to be private again, they wanted security and that kind of thing, or for whatever reason they personally decided it wasn't worth a personal cost to them.
Yeah, and you have to take that into consideration. There is, as you were just saying, a lot that can happen to women who do come out. Their name is out there. What does this mean for their career? But I even want to take a look at Lisa Bloom and look at some of her past trajectory in these cases. She did defend Harry Weinstein. There are some concerns about, okay, if you are an attorney who wants to stand up for women's rights, why did you defend Harry Weinstein, and why are you now saying we want to go against Trump? It looks political, and I think maybe that's why some of the women decided we don't want her to defend us in this.
I think even she has kind of backtracked on that, saying maybe that wasn't the best decision, because, you know, it doesn't, you as an attorney, you know, we know that you're not always, you know, in simpatico with your client, but
listen, there's no doubt it's political. And let's just put out there that Harvey Weinstein is a terrible guy, right? And I think that's one thing that everybody can agree on in the new year. It's extremely political. That is absolutely the case. But that's kind of the nature of the game that we've all chosen to play. And so can't deny that it's political, but again, we also can't deny that these women might not have very serious claims that should be considered.
True. I mean, both of those things can be true at the same time. Don and Beverly, great to see you both.
Thank you, Shannon.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
We're not even going to ask about resolutions. And
both the current guy in the White House and his son have been tweeting about the so-called deep state, which is a conspiracy theory that government employees loyal to Obama and Hilary are working behind the scenes to derail his presidency. Now, does this seem a little odd? I mean, it's been around a long time, this theory of the deep state. But this, I mean, based on what the Oxford Dictionary says, which is, you know, it's a body of people, typically influential members of government agencies or the military, believed to be involved with the secret manipulation or control of government policy.
Yeah.
Is this one would think if this was real, if this was real, do you think he'd still be a sitting president right now?
Isn't he saying that it's on Twitter? Isn't this on Twitter? When he says that Trump,
it's everywhere.
That they're on Twitter, he's saying that they're telling him who to follow on Twitter. So, like, Ellen DeGeneres is in here somewhere. That they're telling
in the deep state.
Yeah, they're telling him to follow Ellen DeGeneres.
Well, it is
maybe
worth
the Russians
noting.
are planting this stuff. How does he know? Ask Jared.
Say what?
It's worth noting that 48% of Americans think the deep state exists, according to an ABC This Network poll.
How many?
48% of Americans, and both sides believe it. Both. 46% of Republicans say there's a deep state. 45% of Democrats. 51% of independents.
Is Rowan from B613 running the deep state? That's ridiculous.
The deep state doesn't necessarily have to be a conspiracy about President Trump. It can be a conspiracy about Area 51. It can be a conspiracy about
Area
government
51
agencies.
exists.
Let me tell you. let me tell you the danger.
51%.
It's dangerous because the media is here for a purpose. It has a very important historical role. And when people that don't know the difference in these mediums are sitting out there going, oh, medium, fake news, you are kind of taking away a check and balance of society.
It's also very dangerous for the media not to live up to the responsibility that they have, and that is to actually present factual information.
But
I mean, a lot of times I sit in a room.
When one person does it, I think you need to say, we read this article, and that is problematic because there are like thousands of us. And we can only do our part individually. So when you call out all of us each time, we take the fall for when we do backup research and we do present information, you're making us all take that fall.
Well, and I think that goes both ways. I mean, the media often characterizes all Republicans, all conservatives, all Democrats. I think that happens certainly on both sides when you take those generalities, and that certainly, I think, is a give and take, not just from the administration, but also from the news media.
Is the media supposed to not report on the fact that 95% of what he says is a lie?
Well, that's... The problem with that, Joy, is that is you are doing exactly what we're talking about and pushing a false narrative.
No, it's not.
95% of what the president says is not a lie.
It's from PolitiFact, from Politico. It's not just the dreaded New York Times. It is other outlets that say it. 5% of his statements are true. 5%.
That's just it.
And I feel for you. I feel sorry for you that you have to go out and defend those lies every day.
And that has been documented. And so as the face of really the administration, what do you say to the American people when you have a boss that engages in untruths?
Well, I completely disagree with the fact that what you're saying is only 5% of that is true. I know that is simply not accurate, and I think that's one of the dangers that we have right now is we are pushing so many false narratives every day. We're creating false perceptions about the president and, frankly, inhibiting his ability to succeed. I think America should want him to succeed. He is the president whether they voted for him or not, and I think that we have to get behind behind
Yes,
that. We should be championing for his success because his success is America's success, and that's what we should all want.
But you also have to get somebody in the office who recognizes what the truth is. And that, I mean, because, and I will take you just to one point that we can all agree on. Where was President Obama born, and is he an American citizen?
I think this has been pretty well addressed.
Well, but this narrative, this is what I'm talking about. That's a narrative that went on forever and really he didn't clear it up until after he was in office. So there are those things that we could go back and forth with, but I think it would be helpful if he would stick to whatever he's just like. Last night he tweeted one thing and then he said something else the next morning, and it's like come on, man. You know, it's a lie. It's a lie.
I don't think what happened yesterday, I disagree that was inconsistent messaging. The point of yesterday, you've got a very intense legal battle, and the timeline was not set by Donald Trump. It was set by the courts. A decision was forced to be made yesterday.
With DACA.
You have one of two choices. You can either let the courts decide, which means the program can end immediately, which I think the entire country has agreed that that's not a good thing, including the president, or you can take 6 months and you can force Congress to actually do their jobs. A lot of people are protesting Trump Tower. I think they should go protest the